Today is May 24th, and I am Marty Dixon, and thank you for joining me this morning. The sun's just coming up here in Southern Oregon. Hello. And we're going to talk about Shift of the Ages today, Part 2, Wheels of Light. And my first lecture on Shift of the Ages was in February, called Shift of the Ages Part 1, the 500-year mutation period. And if you want to watch that or skim that, you'll see that we were talking about the transition of the Age of Pisces to Aquarius and how we're in the end stage of the Pisces age or the beginning of the Aquarian age, however you want to look at it, but we're in that transition, that 500-year transition period that Jeffrey Wolf Green talked about. And also we talked about Virgo as being the sub-age of Pisces. And every age is approximately 2,000 years long, give or take a few hundred years. And every age has a sub-age, which is the 1,000 years of the last end of the age. And in this case, we are living currently in the Virgo sub-age of Pisces. And so that really lends itself to this talk. And if you want to learn more about it, you can find out in the previous lecture. And we'll talk about it a little bit this morning as well. Welcome, everyone. And I want to sincerely thank Linda Johnson for putting this all together and making this happen. We wouldn't be here without you, Linda. Thank you for your vision and your inspiration and making this real. I want to thank all the other incredible astrologers. I love you. You speak from the heart. You speak your truth. You all have your niche, and what a tremendous job you're doing for us all at this time on Earth, during these troubling times especially. And all the listeners and the students and the viewers, you have to be on the same level as any of the rest of us to be able to understand and appreciate and comprehend this material. So thank you for coming and listening and learning, and I hope that you will share and disseminate as much as you can to bring meaning and hope and clarity to this world that we need so badly. Okay, so let's start here. Okay, I am going to start with a Antikythera mechanism. As you can see here, this is a replica of a mechanism found around between 200 and 150 BC. It was found in ancient Greece and on the island of, off the coast of the Antikythera Island, which is southeast of Greece, on the coast of Greece. It was constructed between 200 and 150 BC. It was used to calculate the exact position of the sun and the moon. You can read about it here, but it was calculated the phases of the moon, predicted eclipses, and indicated the date of the Pan-Hellenic, that means the Hellenistic times, games during that time in Greece. And divers found this off the coast of Greece and believed that it was built around 150 BC, but it did represent a waning Greek civilization and what you might call a waning Greek era that was very high-cultured and highly developed and highly scientific, as you can tell, and they knew a lot about the stars, possibly even more than we know now. But my whole point is that even in ancient Greece, circa 150, this was a civilization that was very, very highly realized and highly sophisticated. And my point is that civilizations, man-made civilizations, rise and fall, and everything eventually reverts back to the mother. And that's one of the big cycles or wheels of light that I'm talking about this morning, is that everything that man does reverts back to the mother, and there are cycles within cycles within cycles of prominence and growth and understanding and realization and breakthrough, and then they decline, and then another one builds, and then another one declines, and they're all intricately combined. They are within each other. And you can see that mirrored in the cosmos as you see planets orbiting stars and solar systems going around galaxies, one after another, after another, after another. There's always a greater center at the center of everything that the Great Mother has constructed in this universe. Our time on Earth is a conscious time on Earth, and we're come here to awaken to greater realities. If we'll just use our imagination. And the cycles of the cosmos are actually within us. There's a greater order to all things, which I give to Neptune. That is the greatest order of all things. And Neptune to me represents the greatest realization of Father, Mother, God consciousness. And so there are cycles within cycles within cycles, and there are grand cycles that govern all of us that we can't even comprehend in our home down here on Earth. So moving right along here, according to certain spiritual teachers and authors, approximately 13,000 years ago, during what the Bible refers to as the fall, or the fall or the deluge or the great flood, mankind's center of consciousness left the region of the heart and reverted to the brain. The memory of a more balanced and well-rounded heart-based consciousness is only a vestigial memory in a very few. Individually and collectively, there is the awakening realization that there once was a better way to exist, and that we must find it again in order to preserve peace and balance on our blue planet. According to indigenous teachings of all continents, we humans have destroyed our home on planet Earth 3 times before. And that's according to the indigenous people or the First Nations people on all continents. There is one caveat to that that I know of, in that the Navajo or the Dene people and the people that have their ancestors are of the Aztec civilization do believe that we are now in the 5th world. But most all other indigenous cultures on all continents believe that we have destroyed 3 previous planet homes, and we are now in the 4th world, looking towards the 5th. But there does not have to be another catastrophe that destroys this world if we can initiate a movement of spirit from the mind to the heart and work together consciously and constructively to ease the inevitable earthly transitions. Earthly transitions come and go, and they always will. Trying to think here, there was one concept, where we're either in a time of building or we're sort of in a time of letting go. But what we're going to talk about tonight are cycles that we know of that build and suspend themselves and then build again. But that big wheel just keeps on turning, so to speak. We just keep going through similar circumstances, really until we learn here on Earth as collectively. For humans to practice shifting the gravity of their consciousness to the heart center, it not only changes one person's life, but it will slowly change the world, as our human hearts are connected via energy fields, very similar to the suns in our galaxy. They're all connected by energy fields, and these energy fields are all connected. Similar to the magnetosphere, there's a magnetosphere around our sun that is exactly the same pattern that is generated by our human heart. It's called a toroidal field, and it goes out from the heart center, and it goes out, and it comes back around and back up and then out again, like 2 wheels turning, and they join in the center where the heart center is. The Hopi teach us that we must transition as humans and complete the journey from the mind to the heart, or we won't survive as human beings because our planet will die. In their terms, the sun will cease to rise. So there's 2 things I want to add here. One is that in the cycle of humans on Earth, there are many indigenous cultures that say that there's one cycle where we're growing into the heart. There's one cycle where we're going more toward the brain. And right now, we're at the end of a very long cycle at a very dark time, or some people believe we're at the beginning of the light. and starting to see through the darkness to begin a cycle back to the heart. When the Hopis say that if we don't learn, our planet will die and the sun will cease to rise, this has been part of their teachings for centuries. And it's part of their oral traditions because the Hopi people, along with many other original peoples and First Nations, have someone that will always sing the sun into existence every sunrise. And they say that they're doing this to make sure that the sun does rise. It could be they have cellular memory of some time when it didn't, some catastrophe when it appeared that the sun did not rise. Who can say? But they sing the sun into existence every day. And so my point is that we kind of take, I think, indigenous cultures for granted, or maybe even poke fun at them a little bit, but if they weren't doing it, would the sun really rise? So let's look a little bit, I started this lecture on May 22nd, today's the 24th, and we're going to look a little bit at this. It's really interesting to me. Let me find my marker here. Bear with me just a moment. Okay. It's really interesting to me that here we are, Sun in Gemini, Moon in Gemini, and this was on the 22nd of May that I did this, and for some reason I just didn't get this lecture done. It just wasn't the right time until today, and oddly enough today, for the next 2 hours, the moon is still in Gemini. So this has great significance to me, the sun and the moon in Gemini right now. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But let's look at today's chart. Here's the sun and the moon in Gemini. We've got Venus retrograde in Gemini. Interesting. Some of us might feel even a little bit more like being by ourselves with Venus in Gemini retrograde and keeping to ourselves and you know, just maybe being a little bit more low-key and doing what we can on our own during these times of being somewhat shut in. And then we've got Mercury in its home sign. So Mercury is very prominent in our current discussions. We're really opening our mind right now during this Mercury and Gemini time to new ideas and reaching out to other people, and certainly via electronics. I mean, how many of us are not toying with our computers more and learning new hardware and new software? I know I certainly am. And so with Mercury in Gemini, this time of seclusion or isolation, so to speak, has really led to a lot of busyness with our figuring out on our home turf what we can do electronically. And that's not a bad thing amidst all of this tragedy. The North Node is also in Gemini, and to me the North Node in Gemini to a large degree is just opening up the world, or excuse me, opening up the world and actually shrinking the world at the same time. A Gemini Sagittarius nodal axis really speaks to East meeting West and learning new ideas and trying new things and opening up to diversity and all kinds of different ways of thinking and learning, and inviting other disciplines and cultures and ways of thinking, mindsets into your world. And I think that's happening certainly electronically. I know that I'm listening to a lot of alternative news now. I'm listening to BBC radio. I like it a lot better than what I have been listening to. And I'm also reading The Guardian more. I find that tends to be pretty neutral. And that's a lot of about what Gemini stands for, is trying to find neutrality, trying to find versatility in our thinking, trying to juggle a lot of things and not be out of balance or take one authority over another. So anyway, today we have a new moon in Gemini, and through the end of May we have a stellium in Gemini. So Gemini, Gemini, Gemini. Gemini is the north node of Uranus for all of us alive on this planet. The north node of a planet correlates to the evolutionary intentions for humans to evolve as a species, which can only be understood in direct relationship to the past. So the south node of Uranus is Sagittarius. And if we think of our collective, or if we think of our past that relate to the archetype of Sagittarius, It could be that we have been very clannish or tribal in the past. And what that's just one suggestion. What Gemini urges us to do is open up to the future, involve all people, engage all people, and we're certainly doing that via electronic communication nowadays. Okay, so as you can see with Saturn and Jupiter crossing over Pluto and Capricorn right here, Saturn and Jupiter passing past Capricorn and beginning a new phase relationship to Pluto, our very reality structures, our constructs of reality, personal and collective, are crumbling and reforming anew. Saturn moved to Aquarius on March 23rd of this year. Both Saturn and Jupiter are currently retrograde along with Pluto until the end of September, but both move to Aquarius the 4th week of December. So we are transforming our belief systems, Jupiter. We are transforming our reality structures, both individually and collectively, Saturn. And these are both lending themselves, Jupiter and Saturn, to Aquarius. Saturn is currently in Aquarius, and as you can see, but it's going to very soon retrograde back to Capricorn. And then the 4th week of December, both Saturn and Aquarius move to Saturn and Jupiter move to Aquarius, excuse me. And so that's going to be part of the expediency and the quickening of this whole transition to the Aquarian age, I think for a lot of us, certainly for astrologers and for a lot of us. And during the next, I would say, 5 to 6 years, we're going to see an ever increasing momentum toward the Aquarian ideals. Remember that Aquarius or Uranus speeds up anything that it touches, accelerates anything that it touches. And having been home and isolated for so long, so many of us, we're coming up with a lot of new creative ideas and new ways of handling things, and doing a lot without the old, Pluto and Capricorn, what no longer serves us, what we no longer need anymore. Okay, in the meantime, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, the 3 transpersonal planets, will be retrograde from mid-August until October. So that's sort of a time-out time. We're sort of progressing toward Aquarius and Aquarian ideals, but we're kind of in a time-out time right now as well. So we're a little bit of both. In October, Pluto goes direct. Neptune goes direct the end of November, and Uranus will be the sole planet retrograde until the end of 2020. So in a sense, tantamount to 2021, Uranus, which will be retrograde, let's see here. Uranus is going to be retrograde, I believe, next month. Yeah, I believe next month. And it will remain there until the end of the year. Let me pause this for a moment. So Uranus is going retrograde in mid-August. Here we go, mid-August until October. So during that time, we'll have a little reprieve, I think, from all this momentum and feeling like we must hurry and catch up and just kind of keep up with the times. We'll have a little bit of reprieve and a more time out and a time to think things through and, take a breather. So these are still the current skies, and at this point, I just want to point out again, this is important to get through. We have to wade through this, unfortunately. Jupiter is retrograde in Capricorn right now. We can learn to soften our convictions and reference more of our intuition, our knowingness, which we never need to defend. We can learn to become more resolute in what truly matters. Jupiter in Capricorn retrograde. What is essential? Pluto. During these hard times, Jupiter represents intuitive synthesis, a process of combining our opinions, Gemini, with our convictions to form progressive, more balanced belief patterns. So there's a time for everything. There's a divine, sacred timing to everything. And there's a reason, there's a good, we can use this time that we're alone and can't go out and do as much, and we can use it to a great advantage. The North Node in Gemini could suggest a return to an understanding of the oral traditions passed down for centuries by indigenous people. I find that I'm studying more Native American prophecy. And I think that this is a good time for that to come out and for people to heed the Native American prophecy, because to me it is the most important words that we have, that we know of on Earth at this time. And they speak truth, and they give us hope, and they give us clarity. And that's what Shift of the Ages Part 3 is going to be about in September, is the little that I know about Native prophecy, but it's the little that I know is powerful. And I'm really looking forward to that. So these traditions are starting to open up more to all people because it's time. I had one teacher, Native American teacher, tell me that one of the signs that it's time to share more with more people is when more non-Native people come forth and show in sincere, intense interest. And when a certain amount of the population comes forth that is non-Native and wants to sincerely learn about the ancient oral traditions and the teachings and the wisdom, traditional wisdom teachings that have been passed down for centuries, if not millennia, that will be the time to open them up. What can current technology offer to ancient oral traditions that were handed down by storytellers to help preserve ancient language, custom, ceremony, wisdom, and guidance? So what can we use in this digital age, combining it to what we knew from our ancestors? Gemini North Node combined with Sagittarius South Node. What a concept. The old paradigm of the past, about 8,000 years ago, has been one of living in increasing polarity. So actually, it's hard to say how long we've been living in increasing polarity. That's hard to say. It's just a guesstimate. But we have been living in increasing polarity for, I would say, at least the past 10,000 years. The new energies that are emerging are seeking balance and the center, or the female part, of all situations to gain the middle ground necessary for higher solutions. We are learning to leave polarity consciousness behind and seek unity consciousness. So if you look at every signature here, for instance, look at Neptune and its polarity, Neptune in Pisces, its polarity point in Virgo. What are we all learning right now, big time? We're learning our niche in this great scheme of things. What is the job of every single person? What are my special talents? What can I offer to the whole? What can this little part, this little body, this little person that I am give to the whole? And look at everyone helping everyone else, and especially the medical, the medical and the healing professionals who are giving what they can and what they do best to other people and serving the whole. It's all in interest of the whole, what one person can do, Virgo, to aid the whole. And we're finding middle ground where we're not so much steeped in illusion and dreaming and sleepwalking and wishing and hoping and dreaming. We're actually doing something to better, in the midst of all this tragedy, to better ourselves. And that's where we meet in the middle. That's the wisdom, is right in the middle of the circle, the balance between the polarities, that we're learning to do our work because we can, and to help other people because it feels good. And then that leads to higher revelation and higher perceptions and closer relationship, perceived relationship to God. And then if we also look at the polarity point, the midpoint between Sagittarius and Gemini, I think I went into this a little bit before, but it's learning from the past and applying it to the new and finding new solutions, new synthesis of ideas and ideals and old concepts and things that we thought were foregone conclusions, and weaving them into a new way of thinking and opening the mind and learning to think anew and entertain new ideas, but still keeping the tradition and wisdom and the value of the past. Jeff Green said in the 90s, the current inevitable evolutionary change we are facing will not come about by, as much as we would hope, projecting peace and love. He said these inevitable changes that are coming about will come because we, the collective, will be forced to change by evolutionary necessity. Well, right now, unfortunately, we're being forced to change. I cannot speak well to abject grief and tragedy, and I'm not going to even try, except I will say bless all the people that have gone to spirit and all of their families and friends. And God help us to heal ourselves and our world and find a better way of living and a better way of coping. But Jeffrey predicted in the 90s that this next great evolutionary challenge that we are currently in is going to come about by evolutionary necessity. We are being forced to change right now, whether we like it or not. And there is a light, an undercurrent of light to all of this tragic time that we're in right now. And I want to believe that. We need to try to get along and start to work and agree to find common solutions to our health and well-being. If nothing else, agree to disagree and continue to work toward common goodwill, Virgo. He stressed that the key word is try. This is the key to our future. We need to try to get along, and we need to dream a better solution and be thankful for what we have and bless those that have moved on. Neptune is in its home sign, Pisces, allowing us to learn the highest expressions of Venus love, or being birthed to a higher level of compassion and inclusivity. We are now really truly beginning to learn matriarchal values and the importance of nurturing and everyone developing their own inner emotional security. Not only have we been forced to, but it's time. And then, like I said, what is the middle of Neptune in Pisces and its polarity point? What is the middle of Sagittarius? So on and so forth. Letting go of outdated belief systems and learning to examine and reflect how we are more alike than different. Gemini. I just want to take a moment here from the words and say that it's time to take a moment. We're going to cover a lot of material this morning because I feel led to do so. But if you don't feel like it, don't try to take it in all at once. I'm just going to present it because I have to, and know that it's chronicled here for whatever time and space you want to come back and look at it. It's all right here. This is a labor of love. This is why I've done what I've done, and so many of you do what you do. So let's just take a moment and absorb for a second. And because we're in a pause or a timeout time now anyway, and what we're beginning to choose between on a conscious level is impulse or action. So we're having a little bit of time now, which is a blessing, a natural blessing, to think, do I need to react so quickly? Do I need to react so heatedly? Do I need to react? Can I pull back and just really absorb the situation and let go and let God? I see a majority of people who just want to go back to the way it was. That's okay, but it never will be the same. So it confounds me, frankly, to tell you the truth. But that's okay, everybody, to each their own. Pluto went retrograde the last week of April and will continue retrograde until mid-October. Neptune turns retrograde in July until the end of November, along with Saturn and Jupiter, that I believe are turning retrograde. Jupiter's turning retrograde in August until the end of September. Oh, that's right. Saturn and Jupiter go retrograde in July until the end of September, and Uranus is retrograde from mid-August until the first week of 2021. So at the very end of this year, we will actually have a little reprieve with Uranus retrograde until the first week of 2021, where we can breathe a little bit more. And as an astrologer, that's what I look at, is where's my time out? Where's my time out? When's my time to apply myself? Where's my time out? When do I have time to think about it? And just learning to slow down a little bit and breathe and choose our reactions a little bit wiser. Right now, we're in the eye of the needle. With Neptune transitioning Pisces, it is going through the birth canal. Our consciousness is being transformed, reformed, revamped, reborn. With Neptune in Pisces, the birth canal is a tunnel, and it's getting narrower and narrower with the planet transiting its own sign. So narrow that we can't turn around, and we'll have no choice but to move forward. This is also symbolized by the new birth and rebirth and transformation of Saturn and Jupiter that have just moved past Pluto and will be ingressing into Aquarius. Embrace the timeout. Give thanks for it. As one of my teachers, Robert Goswolf, said, don't curse the rain. And don't fight the river. Just let it come. Let the emotions come. Let the water come. Bless the water. And let it come. Let it cleanse us. Neptune is teaching us a higher consciousness. If we will only osmose it and let it seep in. We are much more alike than we are different, is what Robert taught us. We're going through birthing pains together. We're all in this together. We were born to go through this together, and when we will learn together through inevitable change, struggle, and sacrifice. But we will learn higher lessons. Let's see what time it is here. Okay. We know that Aquarius, ruled by Uranus, has to do with unresolved trauma and sudden unexpected events. We are in intense times of transition, and these next 5 to 6 years will test us as we are giving birth to a new paradigm. We must be patient with each other, for it is truly a birthing process. Mother Earth knows what she's doing. She gives us natural rhythms to adapt to and accustom ourselves. Trust in the process. Find your niche. Do the best that you can. That's all we can do. And then rest in that assurance. You're doing the best that you can do. And I think that we're all trying to come up a level and be a little bit better people. After the Great Fall or the Great Flood, which was around 10,000 BC or 11,000 BC, however you look at it, human consciousness plummeted. Around 6500 to 5500 BC, according to the teachings of Geoffrey Green, the winds of patriarchal belief systems began to blow. Approximately 6,500 years later, the Christ or the Nazarene was born. And the birth of the Nazarene, I think that Geoffrey puts his chart at the year 7 BC. Actually came at a very dark time in our history when things were starting to shift, and we were feeling a bit lost as people on Earth, and we didn't have much of a light or direction or a course to take, so to speak. We had sort of lost our compass. And then if you look at the 6,500 years from, say, 11,000 to now, that translates to a 13,000-year cycle. And for all of my teachers, they say that the last 13,000 years has been, to a great extent, a male cycle or patriarchal cycle. And Geoffrey teaches that in the midst of this patriarchal cycle, from about 6,500 to 5,500 BC, is when the winds of patriarchal belief systems really started to kick in. So you can see there are cycles within cycles within cycles. And I'll tell you, it took me about 20 years to really understand that, because I used to think linearly. I used to think, oh, this took this amount of time and it shoved this part out, and then it took this amount of time and it shoved this part out. No, they are combined. Cycles are combined within each other, and they undulate and they wave and they flow and they fluctuate and they move in and out of each other. And that's how we can understand time a little bit better. And when you put two 13,000-year cycles together, one considered male, quote male, which we're in right now, the end of one right now, and one considered, quote, female, which we were in prior to the year 11,000, you get 26,000 years. The precise measurement of an actual precession of the equinoxes that takes the vernal equinox sun, approximately a little over 2,000 years to go through every zodiacal sign in the in our view of things, from our earthly view. And then if you combine all of those signs together, it's a 26,000 year precessional cycle, or what the ancient Hindus referred to as the Great Year. So in the Great Year, the time that it takes the sun to, say, go through the Age of Aquarius back to the original Age of Aquarius, which we think was the Age of Atlantis, that takes 26,000 years. And there's a 13,000 years of more of a male side of that, female side of that cycle, and there's another 13,000 years that is more of a male side of that cycle. We're going to see some diagrams here in a moment. But what's fascinating to me is around 3,113 BC is the date that the Mayan calendar began, tantamount to December 21st, 2012, end of the Mayan long count calendar. So this was actually a division of 5,125 years. So if you take the year 3113 BC and you add to that 5,125 years, you get to 2012 AD, and I should have put the correct times in here. And this point here, around 2000 or 2012, many believe, including indigenous cultures, that this marks the returning point back to the time of the matriarchy, a time that we had during the great era of Atlantis. The Maya had divided their long count calendar into 5,125 year cycles. And when you add those up, they become 25,625 years. So do you see the similarity between the Mayan calendar here and our current way of approximating the Great Year or the entire precessional cycle? 26,000 years or 25,000 years, 625. It's very close. The difference in the Mayan calendar is that theirs was a Venus-based calendar, and these 5,125 year cycles were based on ancient prophecy and the Venus cycle. They called it 5 cycles of the dawn star. So nowadays, it's largely thought that a full precessional cycle is thought to be about 25,800 years, give or take 100 years or so. I mean, it's hard to say. Some people say, they go with the Mayan calendar, 25,625. Some people say 25,700. Some people say 25,900. I believe it to be somewhere between all of those. About 13,000 years ago, it is believed by some that our Earth underwent a pole shift in which the direction of the Earth's axis, which now points toward Polaris, the North Star in the Arctic Circle, became reoriented to the pole star Polaris. Previously to that, it had been oriented to this pole star Cepheus. And some people believe that our actual polar axis was oriented, the North Pole was actually in Hudson Bay in northeastern Canada. And today it is further northwest of that in what is called the polar circle, and pointing toward Polaris. Uranus through Taurus, where it is right now, we have to innovate, learn to see outside of the box, become more self-sufficient. We've all had to become more self-sufficient, hands down. Rise out of the consensus, cooperate with nature, help one another, take responsibility. Taurus, Taurus, Taurus. Learn to adopt new values, embrace change and the unknown. Taurus, Taurus, Taurus. Come out of your shell, come out from under your rock. Get with the program. Address what you fear, where you hurt, what you don't know. Address it. Love yourself. Encourage others to do the same. Value yourself. Value what you do. Value your role in the world in all of this. Everyone has a part right now more than ever. It is the beginning of Aquarian healing. The beginning of Aquarian healing is to objectify and identify a problem or a hurt, and then you can really deal with it. And that's a lot of what we're doing with Uranus and Taurus right now, individually and collectively. But it starts with the individual. Learning to share instead of hoard and dominate. Chief Joseph of the Lakota tribe said, I believe in the 1800s, late 1800s, you can't buy and sell the earth. So we're in sort of a innovative time in terms of our monetary system. We're learning to trade, we're learning to barter, we're learning to know what's of value and what's not, and hopefully get rid of everything we don't need. Neptune will be moving through Pisces in 2024 until 2025, dissolving the illusions. We're in a state of disillusionment right now, and it's necessary because there has to be a state of involution prior to evolution into the new Aquarian age. And this disillusionment is is tantamount to the Aquarian age transition. And if anybody says, when is the Aquarian age coming? Well, we're in the transition period now. We're in the waters now. Old patriarchal systems and beliefs have to come to a head before they began the process of dissolving. And Pluto's moving to Aquarius in 2023 and will be there direct in 2024. So all things of the past age of Pisces, must come to a head before and be dealt with and looked at and internalize the lessons before we can before we will move into the Aquarian age. It's simply happening. It's a part of sacred timing. It's simply happening whether we heed it or not. It's there for us to learn, and hopefully it's easily just to heed the advice and let it sink in and meditate and know where we're supposed to be at this time. But not until Uranus moves to Gemini will we start to find real global solutions of equanimity and incorporate equanimity, intelligence, and cooperation in 2026. This will actually, Uranus and Gemini will actually trine Pluto and Neptune. So to me, it's just how much Gaia has to teach us and put us to the test. There is a divine intelligence, is what I'm talking about, a higher pattern to all of this chaos. That's Neptune, the Great Mother. There's a bigger evolutionary process than we even know of. The cosmos unfolds uniformly like a giant DNA molecule. That we need to listen to each other, be patient, adapt, and grow if we are going to continue on a good road. It's there for our taking, our acceptance, our embrace, or not. And if we don't, it's just going to be harder for us. So that if there's anything that each one of us can learn to do personally, individually, is to get out of our polarization and still the mind and build the magnetic field around the heart. Meditate and pray, or make music or whatever it is that helps you to calm down and become harmonious. Build the magnetic field of the heart, which is stronger than the magnetic field of the brain, and get out of this polarized conscious as if someone is always trying to do something to somebody else, whether they are or they're not. It's not that conducive to healing and finding your center. So in taking a moment, I just want to mention as well that we are in isolation. We are learning to intensely individuate and differentiate and know ourselves and get to become our own best friends. We are observing more we have time to observe more of the sky and the night sky and nature in general. And nature, I believe that the carbon imprint I just heard on BBC Radio has been reduced by about 7%. So nature's the winner in all this. Mother Nature is really, you can actually see it and feel it. You just go out and breathe and take some time, take a walk or be with an animal, and Mother Nature is really having a reprieve and learning what it's like to get on the road to restoring herself if we can only keep that up. So we're internalizing more natural processes, getting in the rhythm and the flow of things more, and internalizing more of our own ancient inherent wisdom, becoming more increasingly conscious of what we may have been subconsciously aware of in the past. We're all part of the Great Awakening. Let's see here. We're learning to live deliberately, to live here now together, and to learn to live our lives as if it mattered. With all of these stellium, this is the solar eclipse in December 25th of last year. And look at all of the planets, Mercury, Sun, Moon, Jupiter, South Node, which is going the opposite direction. But Ceres, Saturn, and then Venus just past Neptune. All of these planets, especially Mercury, Jupiter, and Saturn, are all have all moved past Pluto now and been transformed in some way or another. And this is huge. And also passing the South Node, which is our literal past, our individual and collective past. So right now we're learning to live life as if it matters. We're learning what is essential. Pluto, we're being purged. We're learning to live together. We're learning the true meaning of reciprocity, right relationship, right action, and right response. We're learning to take a time to breathe and not be so reactionary, hopefully. With Mars in Pisces right now, hopefully we're learning to count to 10 a little bit more. So we're learning to live deliberately and with a purpose and for the right reason. And we're learning to eliminate that which doesn't serve us. And we're learning to only look at the essential, which is a great lesson. And there's an emotional counterpart to everything, because we all learn through the emotional and evolve through the emotional body. And that is, how do we subliminally process osmose and ultimately carry the lesson? We do it through the emotional body. And that is what we have come here to take advantage of, this opportunity to do so. The door to the emotions is the human heart. We are learning to deepen and mature emotionally. It's called evolution. With a Pluto polarity point in Cancer, this is a sign of the solar eclipse of June 21st, 2020, coming up in about a month. But with a Pluto polarity point in Cancer, as it has been for many, many years with Pluto transiting Capricorn, our focus and our direction here on Earth is pointing toward, the world soul is pointing toward the need for all of us to seek deep internal emotional maturity. And that's exactly what we've been doing in these very trying times. And all I can say again is God bless all the families and friends of those that have gone to spirit, and God rest their souls, and may they be warmly embraced in a realm of light. More of the current skies. So here is today, this is the 22nd, but the moon, oddly enough, is still in Gemini. So I think we're supposed to concentrate on Gemini. So in a sense, you could say the current aspects to the Pluto stellium right here in the sky are just as rare as the Pluto conjunct Saturn and Jupiter in Capricorn signature that we have had since the end of the year, really. And since the end of the year, Jupiter and Saturn have progressed past Pluto and become transformed. They're new phase to Pluto, so they're beginning new journeys and new directions and taking on new meaning. And when you look at everything that's affecting this chart is affecting the stellium, and this stellium has not been seen. Pluto and Jupiter and Saturn in Capricorn for a little over 4,000 years. So everything that's going on in the skies now, especially in these very profound and intense times, is all predicated on this very rare signature of Pluto conjunct Jupiter and Saturn in Capricorn. And there's so much more to that. And we have the most incredible astrologers in the world today that tell us how this stellium in Capricorn is all has been dealt with and predicated by the South Node moving through it and away from it, distancing itself now. And it's also all predicated on all of us alive on Earth today and throughout the past century all have our South nodes of Pluto, Jupiter, and Saturn in Capricorn. Can be seen right here. We are accessing the South, the past big time. And we are accessing that time of great patriarchal transition, circa 6500 to 5500 BC that Jeffrey taught us about, we're looking back to that time and thinking, how are we going to integrate the Capricorn properties into our lives now and balance them with the Cancer polarity to Pluto, which is each of us gaining our own true emotional inner security, emotional security. So Venus is retrograde in Gemini. It's square to Neptune in Pisces, right here. Suggesting we might be overlooking the importance of reaching out to others, adapting, relating any way we can, and not be afraid to improvise, seek out new groups, communicate electronically, step out of your comfort zone, and learn something new. If you want to keep sane, it's a really good idea. This is a time to learn more about the software, hardware, wires, and hookups that keep us connected, not to mention learning new hookups in the brain, reprogramming the brain. Jeffrey teaches us by valuing our life here in density that it is tantamount to finding ultimate value in relationship to Creator, and also helps us with relationships. So with Venus here in Gemini, the higher octave is Neptune, and they're squaring each other. So we're really learning to value our little lives down here on Earth, Venus, and we're learning that we're thinking differently, and our mindsets are different, and we're learning to value our little lives down here that is tantamount to relationship with Creator. Don't miss this opportunity to rethink and reinitiate your relationship to yourself and how you think about yourself. Do you really value yourself? Do you really value your life? Does your very beingness and your life and your presence have meaning to you? It may feel as if we were surrendering to Spirit right now to ask, what do you want of me? Why am I here experiencing this? The wise know that we are learning to be of service, Virgo, to be a part of the greater whole, and being prepared for future events. It's called sacred timing. So the whole lesson behind the higher consciousness opportunities that we have with Neptune and Pisces right now are predicated on learning our little roles down here on Earth. How can we help? How can we help a person that's has less than I do? How can we share? It's because we're being very much prepared for future events. Bear with me just a moment here. Okay, let's see here. Bear with me. These are out of order, but I guess it doesn't really matter. Okay, we'll just go with it. We are currently dealing with a Pluto stellium in 2020 in Capricorn. There has not been a stellium like this for over 4,000 years. Roughly 2000 BC is when the last stellium was found. This is jumping way ahead, but the beginning of the Age of Aries, or the high time of the Minoan civilization on the island of Crete. So this parallels the time that we're in right now. It represented the first advanced civilization in Europe, a time of high prosperity, relative peace, high culture, and art, known for their sky, ocean, and dolphin murals, incredible architecture, flowing hallways, pastures, and sculpted gardens, poetry, and music. And they were also thought to be somewhat of an androgynous culture. The men mirrored the women, and the women mirrored the men. They were tall and had angular features and long hair, and they were very beautiful. Was this the culture that created the Antikythera mechanism? Well, the height of the Minoan era was around 2000 BC, and then they lasted until the end of ancient Greece, which would have been roughly 100 BC. And it makes me wonder if that's when the Antikythera mechanism might have been developed, and we found it in the 1900s. The 1990s, which is interesting because that sort of is right before the time that we're in now, and the two civilizations are nearly 4,000 years apart, and we have the same Pluto stellium in Capricorn that we had roughly 4,000 years ago. So we are leaving a dominated, greed-oriented, divisive, monetarily based mindset and growing toward a more partnering, sharing, and unifying way of living. Are we headed toward another renaissance of sorts, of arts, culture, philosophy, and science? Could be. During this time of heavy Aquarian orientation, we are all really leaning toward the Aquarian influences, the Aquarian archetypes now in a astrological chart. We are lightening up, getting rid of heaviness and burdens. We are leaving density and entering more lightness. Is there a connection with the previous civilization that also had Jupiter and Saturn transiting Pluto toward the new phase Aquarian influence? So, you know, if we look at similar signatures, we can see similar influences, and we can understand the undulating of time cycles within cycles a little bit better. I'm going to need to pause here because my slides are out of order, so excuse me just one moment. Okay, my slides were not out of order. I've just been up all night and didn't recognize it. So, this was right where it was supposed to be. Okay, so bless the gentle rain. One of my teachers, a Native American teacher, always blessed the rain. He said water's everything, and all of the people that I know in the people of Native descent in Ashland, they always do rain ceremonies and bless the rain, and they really emphasize the water. And so in this time of trial, when it seems like it's just raining all the time and what's next and what's going to come next, he said when it's raining hard, the native wisdom is to not run outside and curse the rain. He said never curse the rain. He said, I thank you, Great Spirit, for your gentle rain. And then he says, just you watch, and you just watch that rain calm down and become peaceful again. It's time to relax the over-rational mind. What my next lecture in September is going to really emphasize is Native American thought patterns and belief systems. And during this time, we can really use them. And we're going to depend on them more and more in the future. It's something very emotional to many people to wake up and realize that the original people had it right all along. So, during this difficult time, we have the North Node in Gemini making a culminating square or last quarter square to Neptune in Pisces. Mercury goes retrograde on June 18th. It's even more of a time to take time out. Read the signs all around us in nature. Listen to nature. Listen to the birds. Look at the stars. What's transiting in the stars? What is the rain telling you? What is the soft, gentle weather telling you? Look at the clouds. Look at the sky. Is it getting bluer? Is the quality and the nature of the light more apparent? Let it fall on your forehead. This is a time to get back to natural, native truths and activities and really feeling nature that's all around you as opposed to over-rationalizing her. So when Mercury goes retrograde, it's a great time out. Jupiter is brilliant in the southeast midnight sky alongside Saturn. It's breathtaking. I almost rode off the road when I saw it. It looked like a spaceship. The North Node is in an applying quincunx to Jupiter to help connect our heart to the heart of the Earth. So natural, native, traditional, ancient belief systems are what is speaking to us very much in these days. And they are telling us to stop and listen and learn because we're going to need them for the future. I like to say we're in a time of global warning. And I do believe, as Jeffrey said, that Y2K was a warning not to become over-dependent on computer systems and the digital age. And I do believe that we're going through this coronavirus tragedy is a global warning to try to reawaken our immune systems in every way possibly, not just physically, but emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. Neptune, 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 to prepare ourselves for the challenges and the changes that are going to come ahead of us. You can look at the current situation as a blessing or a curse, however you look at it, but the Lakota people always said in their stories that depending on the way that you're looking at an event can very much affect its outcome. If I can think of the story, it depends on how you look at things, because there's good and bad in everything. So listen to what nature is calling all around you. What is she relaying to your heart? Instead of cursing the rain, the hope you believe that we should bless the gentle rain if we wish her to calm down. To make a note to myself here. Yeah, the Lakotas speak that perception is everything. So, Neptune's polarity point is currently 20 degrees Virgo. Virgo to me highly represents the purity, honesty, and hopefulness of the Hopi people. It is so vital for each of us now to find our niche in the great scheme of things and to do the work that we came here to do, the service to the whole that we signed up for before incarnation. That's what the Hopi teach. They teach hope and they teach peace. And they teach to do your job is the greatest reward and reaps the greatest benefit and joy. To do something good for someone else is the greatest blessing. And they say, do whatever you can simply because you can do it, because you're here. What the Hopi realize is that doing one's job and helping others brings the greatest joy. It is so simple that many people overlook this. It's learning the tasks down here on earth that eventually elevate us to the revelation of God consciousness. And it is the pursuit of ultimate value and meaning, Pisces, that leads us toward our true path of service or stewardship. So there's the Pisces Virgo polarity right there. Finding, excuse me, your role in the great scheme of things somewhere in the middle. Finding balance. This stewardship is uniquely different to everyone and creates personal relationship to the Creator. So working hard down here creates personal relationship to the Creator. It might seem incongruent, but it is the way to God. I've shown this before in the last lecture, but I want to show it again. Jeffrey told, we're currently in the Virgo sub-age of the Age of Pisces, and it's all there in the last lecture. Jeffrey said there was a corruption factor, Capricorn, during the transition to during this last about 13,000 years ago, at the end of the last 13,000 year cycle, there was a corruption factor, Capricorn, and all of us have actual collective memory and individual memory of the consequences of corruption, and that's why there's a progressive collective rebellion all over this planet against authoritarian forms of government or corruption at any level. And I'm doing this lecture hopefully to give people hope. If they see that things in our government, our society, our institutions are corrupt, out of balance, insincere, have gone completely haywire, this gives us hope to know that there was a corruption factor at the end of Atlantis as well, about 13,000 years ago, and we're in the end of another 13,000 year cycle, which is very, very parallel to where we were 13,000 years ago. But we don't have to go through another natural calamity to wake up and find ourselves. If we stay in the heart, we can get through these next earth changes and tumultuous times and stay intact. So the key is to stay in your heart and to be connected to the heart of the earth, through prayer and meditation. And we can start to creep a little bit of that into our prayers and meditation every day. Connect me to the heart of the earth, and try to meditate and go down to your heart center and pat your heart and calm yourself down. It's what indigenous people have done for millennia. Because the age was coming to a culmination at the end of the last Atlantean era, and any time an age comes to a culmination, the archetypes that have defined that age come to a head in spades rapidly. That is everything coming full circle. How many in your individual lives here don't have a sense of, in a kind of strange Neptunian way, that things are now coming full circle on you? And one thing I'd like to point out is that around 13,000 years ago, at the time of the Great Fall, call it 11,000 BC, that was the time that we think that it was also after the destruction of Atlantis. within maybe hundreds of years. And if you go back another 13,000 years, that is roughly 26,000 years ago. And that was the time of the last age of Atlantis. So we're in a time right now that is similar to the culmination of the last age of Atlantis. But actually, we're entering the age of Aquarius right now, and that was the same age that we were entering into 26,000 years ago, approximately around the inception of the age of Atlantis. I don't want to confuse people. I just want to say this because if you think about it enough, it starts to sink in. If you think about 26,000 years ago, we were entering into the age of Aquarius, and that puts the inception of the era of Atlantis at about 24,000 BC. And we all have cellular memory of the age of Atlantis. We are currently experiencing a Pluto stellium in Capricorn. The emphasis is that the Capricorn Cancer polarity and the collective pull to return to a new matriarchal way of existence. We are now at a very dark patriarchal time, and we are being birthed into the light and a new matriarchal way of existence. And one thing that Jeffrey teaches is that there are cycles within cycles within cycles. And not only Jeffrey, but all the teachers I've had have said the same thing. We go through male cycle, female cycle, cycle, female cycle. And there's big ones and there's little ones. Right now we're at the end of a very pronounced patriarchal cycle. And in terms of Vedic tradition and Vedic yugas, the times can seem very dark, that we're away from the light. And we're very much into a materialistic world. Well, we were very much there about 13,000 years ago. And something else happened back then, a catastrophe, that doesn't necessarily have to happen or affect us in the same way again if we stay in the heart. So we're very much returning to a matriarchal way of existence. And what Jeffrey said that I'll never forget is we're reverting back to the matriarchy. And he said, in the past it had been somewhat extreme. And even a matriarchal way of existence can become extreme and become slightly crazy and out of balance. So much so that it needs the male, or the patriarchal, so to speak, the male balance to the female. And so what he said, we're entering a time of matriarchal existence. He says, who would opt for more extremity? Nobody raised their hand. He said, who would opt for more balance? So we are balancing the male and the female, the patriarchal and the matriarchal. I'll try to point that out in a little bit. Keep my eye on the time here. We're going to go backwards to go forwards. It starts with the remembrance of and the necessary elimination of Pluto, the false doctrine that flesh and spirit are in contradiction with one another. To remove this false doctrine from the Piscean age, then, is when it's going to happen. We've then eliminated a truckload of guilt. So Jeffrey said many times that one of the great lessons from the Piscean era, one of the great blessings that we can internalize if we choose to, is that we don't have to suffer to be spiritual. So flesh and spirit are not in contradiction, and we can live ourselves and be ourselves and have our beliefs and live our lives fully. And we do not have to suffer to be spiritual. And there's nothing wrong or sinful about women either. That's a whole other point to that. That women who represent the flesh and the man who represents the spirit, one is not submissive or superior to the other. The polarity of an age is accentuated and brought to a head by its polar subage that lasts 1,000 years or so, and can be times of heightened evolution. So right now we're looking to get rid of fear and guilt, the Virgo subage of Pisces, and we don't have to suffer to be spiritual. And we see a lot of religious fanaticism. I'll just leave it at that. These can be times of heightened evolution, especially during Neptune retrograde periods that are like a door open to Pluto. Well, guess what, folks? Neptune turns retrograde June 23rd of 2020 until early October. That's going to be a time of heightened evolution of our consciousness. So I recommend that you find a place in nature to meditate and pray or do your music, whatever it is that gets you into that zone. Okay, my last lecture I talked about the yugas. I'm going to try to go as quickly as I can here, and I mentioned that my teacher, John Major Jenkins, had taught us that we are at the darkest point on the wheel. This says farthest point on the wheel right now, and this is a adjusted cycle of the ancient yuga wheel that John Major Jenkins did. The yuga wheel is along the outside here, and then his adjustment is with the axis, where he's put this December solstice 2012 event right here at the farthest and darkest point from the light, so to speak, right in the middle of the Kali Yuga, right on, he said, right coming out of the middle of the Kali Yuga, so pointing toward the light, toward the ascending cycle. My teacher, Chief Red Eagle, in the 80s said that and also this is, right now, John Major Jenkins says that December 21st, 2012 was right here, just past the mid point of the Kali Yuga, which is a very dark point. My teacher said that the point of the darkest point here was the year 985 AD, and that would make it a still right about here in the Kali Yuga, meaning that we're in the darkest night. We're just kind of pointing toward the light. And the reason that my teacher said it was 985 AD, and he was a Native American Modoc and Ute and Puta tribe, he said that because that is the time, 985, when cliff-dwelling civilizations started to disappear and go to a higher octave. And I'll try to talk about that in September. It is fascinating. So when very spiritual-minded people, cliff dwellers around the world, started to consciously leave this dimension and go toward another one, because they saw the pollution, the spiritual pollution, and the irreverence of the land, and they saw people of other nationalities and colors coming who did not revere the land, and they opted to leave to another dimension. It was as if they'd left overnight. But in the Holy Science book written by Sri Yukteswar in 1894, he states that this darkest point is actually 500 AD, or the Dark Ages. And as some of you have pointed out, and I thank you so much for this, it's all information, Gemini. We all need the information. We can consider it for ourselves. But these esteemed people have told us that Sri Yukteswar said that we are now in the beginning ages of the Dwapara Yuga, which is more toward the light and more positioned toward the light and out of complete and utter darkness. And we're more in an enlightened era now, and ascending more toward the light. Okay, let's see here. But wherever we are, I'm going to go back once. Wherever we are ascending toward the light, and we're past the darkest point. John Major Jenkins called this galactic midnight. And let's see here. And we're able, when we're, the only good point about going through all this darkness together and having been there, or having past life memory of having been in very dark times, is that we learn to steer ourselves by our inner compass. There's a light inside, and that's the only really good thing that comes out of it. You learn to follow your intuition and your instincts. Hopefully we haven't lost too much of that. So the Tibetans and the Hindus said there are two sides to the grand year, a male and a female side, and a little after 13,000 years it switches from female to male. We're at the end of a very long 13,000 year male side right now, and we're transitioning to the female side. Any way you look at it. And you can see this in the dark and the light of the earth. They said half of the time the earth is light, half of the time it's dark, and there's nothing wrong with a dark side or a male side or a female or a light side. They each have their inherent value and they each work together, and we are to find balance between the two. Because we learn something in the male side of things that we don't have in the female side. And during very tough times, we need male protection, and to a large degree is what they teach, the Tibetan and Hindus, that we need the male protection and guidance during tough times to lead us into the lighter times when we need a different type of a mindset. And I'm not talking about men and women, I'm talking about the divine male and feminine in all of us. So there's cycles upon cycles upon cycles, and we're now evolving into a precessional or a ascending cycle toward the light, so to speak. Okay, I don't think I'll go into that. I don't think I need to go on that. But they say that everything eventually, cycles within cycles within cycles, eventually start to even out and balance and cycle and spiral toward a greater light. I love that. They cycle and spiral to a greater light. When I was in Hopi Land, one of the teachers there told me, let me quote this, I'll put it on my bookmark here. They said, because they're native people, they have one designated who is always singing the sun into existence in the sunrise. They say, those who stand and face the light will wake up in a hurry. Then we will see the spiral home to our true souls. May great mystery make sunrise in your heart. So what they're telling me is that there's a spiral that we will sense in all of us if we stand and meditate and let the light penetrate our frontal lobe, which is also the receptor for our pineal gland. So I love the correlation between the spiraling light and the Hindus teaching that all of the cycles within cycles within cycles of history are part of a great spiral that's going up toward the light, and we are simply seeking balance. And then I said, could all of this have something to do with the quality and the nature of the light emanating from our galactic core at this time and activating our pineal gland or third eye? But it's a really good idea to meditate facing the light and let the light rest on your pineal gland. You'll get a tremendous download there, certainly at different points in the year and different parts in the astrological cycles. So here really quickly, just for your perusal, is the yoga cycles again. A precessional entire year is about 25,800 years according to the Hindu. And that very much likens, is a precessional year according to Western astrology is about 25,800 years. The Hindus had called it about 24,000 years, but that was a very old calculation. But they're similar. You see, they're similar. It depends on how you look at it and how you study it. I think we've been through all of this. The ancient Chaldeans, Zoroastrians, and Greeks also believed in a 12,000 year. So what they're looking at is a 12,000 year, here's the light, a 12,000 year descending cycle and a 12,000 year ascending cycle toward the light. And the quality and the nature of the light changes dramatically through this 26 or 27,000 years. And our solar system actually gets closer to what they consider to be a great central sun and further away during this transition of a great precessional year. And the quality and the nature of the light changes. I tend to believe it. Okay. Here's another picture of the great central sun and our Earth going around our sun that is thought to be orbiting another sun. And in what I have learned in about the past 20 years is that we do have a companion star. I truly believe it to be Sirius A that is causing the wobble of the Earth, causes the Earth to wobble and causes the precession of the equinoxes. So 2012 represents a sort of galactic midnight according to John Major Jenkins. I hope to go more into an interview that I did with him in the next lecture. It's like the end of a Kali Yuga in the Hindu tradition, according to John. It's a time of maximum spiritual darkness. So this is all according to John. This is what he told me in the interview. But there's something beautiful about this extreme polarity because it's like the still point between the breaths. And he practiced yoga and meditation, and he would practice on the still point between the breaths. And he said he could feel and see and sense a cosmos opening up inside of him. And it's true that everything that we see out there, so to speak, we have contained in here. We mirror the skies. We have the same geometrics as the sun and the moon and the planets within us in terms of our chakra systems. And also, we mirror the skies, and I'll leave it at that. And it's in that still point between the ages where the insight can come through. So I'll just leave this little quote from John here. And he says, there's a time to fall asleep and a time to wake up. He is an incredible man. I believe he passed away shortly after 2012. I think it was 2014. And I love the man. He's incredible. Many people highly regard him. He was a poet. He was a songwriter. He was a script writer. He was a Pisces. Beautiful man. Have a lot to teach us still and forever. He always used to say he wondered what the great Zabuya was, the great mystery at the heart of the cosmos, and now he knows. Keys to the light. We are currently living in a Leo sub-age of the Virgo sub-age of the astrological age of Pisces. So you can see how there's cycles within cycles within cycles. And the Leo sub-age to me says wake up and put your center of consciousness here, meditate from the heart, and dream a better world. Stay in the heart. It's going to get you through a lot. We have time out now to meditate and pray and learn to be in the heart. Thank God. We are at 0 point Pisces on the astrological dial, which represents the inward realization of everything that Pisces age has had to teach us. Ultimate meaning, ultimate values, ultimate ideals, the reason for this incarnation in relation to all of creation and our personal relationship with Creator. What more is there? We have time out now to really realize that and carry it through into the next Aquarian age. This is becoming ingrained, part of our soul material. What is so vital for all of us to do is to find our personal niche, not only in our lives, our families, our personal sphere and community, but to discover and value our special talents and abilities. Leo, North Node of Neptune, for everyone on Earth, for now and for the past century. Our special talents and abilities, Leo, that give our life ultimate meaning and purpose, Neptune. That Neptune inner voice will always tell you what your niche is in the grand ecosystem of things, similar to the niche-making abilities and responsibilities of Virgo. There's a midway point between Virgo and Neptune that helps you know how to practically apply your talents and your abilities and how you can better be of service to the whole and find great fulfillment and feel closer to God. We are all keys to the light. We're all pieces of the puzzle. We are all infinitely creative beings. We're all desperately needed and cherished. Magnetic reversals and pole shifts. There exists a Kundalini, electromagnetic flowing field around the Earth, the very same as it is around the human body, which is generated by the heart. Remember that field that goes like a toroidal field, joins in the center, goes out again, and comes back in. Our very memory is tied to these magnetic fields. According to the Maya, there was a magnetic pole shift that took place around 13,000 years ago, and another one approximately 26,000 years ago, during which times the magnetic fields reduced to zero and humans lost their memory. But if we humans can develop a relationship with our human heart to the heart of the earth, then we can remain centered in our consciousness and learn to steer by our inner compass, Neptune. The North Node of Neptune is Leo, the heart. So, when we had our last pole shift, our magnetic field shifted before the pole shift. We had a electromagnetic shift before the pole shift. The magnetic fields in the Earth were reduced to zero. At that point, all humans on Earth lost their memory, and many of them lost their lives, and many of them lost their minds. But we don't have to go through that again if we remain centered in the heart. This is a teaching of Dunville Melchizedek, who I got to learn from in one of his teachers in one of his classes about 5 years ago. It was one of the highlights of my life. So when the magnetic fields were reduced to zero about 13,000 years ago, and prior to that about 26,000 years ago, the beginning of the Age of Atlantis, or in the inception of the Age of Atlantis, the last Aquarian age, what that does is it causes humans to lose their memory, and we actually know that. The Russians discovered that in their space experiments in the 1990s, and the Mir space station, where the astronauts that went into space for 14 days or longer actually lost their memory. Upon return, they had lost their memory. So what they did is they invented a device that you wear around your neck that generates an electromagnetic field, and they sent them into space again, and they retained their memory. They came back with their memory. But when the magnetic field of the Earth goes to zero, as in a electromagnetic shift or tantamount to a pole shift, humans will lose their memory. And the electromagnetic field right now is very weak. I wish I had 2 hours to go into this, but it's very weak. And so that means that our short-term memory is fluctuating. So what I like to tell people, if they think that I'm forgetting my words or I'm absent-minded, I can't remember my last sentence, I tell them I'm just magnetically challenged. All human consciousness began in the heart. There was a time in our fetal development when we were a human heart and nothing else. Because during a time in our fetal development, we were a heart, and then our body grew out of the heart. It grew all around the heart and contained the heart in the center. Heart consciousness is pure consciousness, and it connects us to all other consciousness in all things, everywhere. Neptune. North node of Neptune is Leo, the heart. We are entering into 4D consciousness, which is pure consciousness, which many indigenous tribes understand and can access by various means, and always have. And once we reach the proper level, we will be introduced to realizations of time and space that today we can only dream of. That's going to be part 3. I'm going to love that part. So almost every indigenous culture on Earth today, the Wataha, the Kogi, the Hopi, the Maya, and the Hopi or Maya, by the way, Owako, Watai, Moria, the Aborigines of Australia, and the indigenous people of the South Pacific, and also the Tibetans. All of them say they came from Atlantis, unequivocally. And they all say that they've been through the last pole shift. Their ancestors were through the last pole shift, or perhaps they were in another body back then. They went through the pole shift 13,000 years ago, and they were through the pole shift and the electromagnetic Earth reversal 26,000 years ago as well. And they retained their memory. They retain memory of those times. They're passed down in the oral teachings that are being opened up to us now. They retain that memory because they knew how to practice and stay focused within their heart. Even when everything was cutting loose and swirling around them, they stayed in the heart. There's a movie on that where tapping your heart keeps you centered. I'll try to find it. Make myself another note here. Okay. It's all frequency, Drumfalo taught us. We're really ancient, we just don't know it. We will begin to function with nearly 100% of our brains, again, in the same way that whales and dolphins use both sides of their brains. What dolphins do is they use one side of their brain about half of the time to sleep, and the other side of their brain, which would be most probably the left side, when they're awake. And if we can learn to sleep and dream 50-50, we're going to become powerful dreamers, tantamount to be able to create in our dreams. So I'm going to hurry along here because I really am going into almost another, past an hour and a half. But the female side of things teaches us that everything has a circumference and everything has a center. And in ancient symbology, the center is considered to be the center of our being, center of our consciousness, center of our life force, our heart, where we generate from. And then the circumference is thought to be the circle of creation. And these are age-old symbols. These are ancient symbols, and they're also included in the glyphs that we have, or astrological glyphs. So if you just look at this for a moment, everything in nature reverts to being round. Everything in nature ultimately reverts to the mother, which is a circle, which is round. All sacred geometry, the flower of life, even planetary movements, synodic cycles, orbits, and retrograde cycles, all become a circle, a grand circle of patterns over time. There is a higher order to what seems to be random or chaos. And right now we seem to be in random and chaos. And I'm saying that's symbolic of the greater scheme of things. There is a higher order to everything. And it's in those times of darkness, seeming darkness and chaos and randomness, that we seek the center and the balance and the trueness and the higher truth of all things and can see it better. And even though it looks like our electromagnetic fields are fluctuating greatly, and we may be looking at a electromagnetic shift and possibly a pole shift in perhaps the next several hundred years, I think it's going to be less than another millennium. The perennial wisdom is trying to press in and sink in and telling us to just stay in the heart. It's all going to be okay if we can learn to be in here. We won't have to suffer, go through calamity again. It's just the wisdom of the Earth Mother trying to right herself. Remember, nature is balance. It will always seek balance. And then this is another age-old glyph. It's a crude cross. It's called the Cross of Matter. It's what connects us to the Earth. It stands for density. It stands for gravity. It stands for what pulls the orbit of all things around itself. It stands for the four directions to the indigenous tribes, the Native American tribes. The four winds, the four animal tribes. It stands for the four migrations for the Hopi tribe, who believe that they live in the center of the earth, the four corners. More than that, it symbolizes a crossroads for humans on earth. And we are at that crossroads now. And I want to get into a little bit more of the Hopi explanation of the crossroads that we're on right now in the next lecture. More than that, the center of the cross symbolizes a meeting place, a midpoint, a timeout, a mediation, a looking at the other as if they are yourself, that place of joining, that field of the heart. The heart knows no polarity. The mind is polar. It thinks either or, this or that, me or you. The heart is all-inclusive. Neptune. North node of Neptune is Leo. The Tibetans inscribed these words upon stone in their land to sing the truth to all the heavens, that within your heart there is a lotus, and within the lotus there is a diamond. This diamond is the source of creation, and in all of creation there is only one lotus. Stair-stepped evolution. There have been times in our known history when cultural, spiritual, scientific, and social evolution have seemed to evolve exponentially. The four fixed signs of Aquarius, Taurus, Leo, and Scorpio are of specific importance in the ancient tarot. They seem to represent the four zodiacal ages. Mathematically would be about 2,166 years each, which is 26,000 divided by 12, which is the amount of years in a grand precessional cycle. If we figure in that each astrological age is considered to have about 500-year mutation period, then we are well into the conceptual stages of the Aquarian age. Now, we just looked at the four directions. I want you to look at this symbol and find the four directions, please. The four fixed signs are believed by some to represent times when the veil between the worlds is at its thinnest, and the electromagnetics of the earth are at their weakest. So we have an excuse for weak memory, allowing for great fluctuations in consciousness and susceptibility to interdimensional influence, the altered state of non-locality. So now's a really good time to pray and drum and dream and do music, because the veil between the worlds is thin. We're right about here. Yeah, we're right about here in terms of ages. And even though some of us might be daydreaming a lot or feel like we're in a fog or can't keep a thought in our heads, we're very, very susceptible to the interdimensional influence through altered states at this time. Consider the age of Leo, circa 8740 to 10,900 BC, and the construction of the Great Pyramids and the Sphinx, and the age of Taurus, circa 2260 BC to 4420 BC, with the thriving of the Egyptian dynasties, and what appeared to be a higher form of civilization in both writing, culture, commerce, star wisdom, invention, spiritualism, almost overnight. This is stair-stepped evolution. These ages may have been periods of our solar system's geometric alignment with the galactic center of our mother galaxy, times when our Earth was influenced by harmonious aspects from the great lights contained in our mother galaxy. Well, we just got through December 21st, 2012, which was a time when John Major Jenkins called galactic alignment, when the center of our mother galaxy was aligned with the center, the sun of our solar system, in the galactic center of our galaxy. And this happens only about once every 4 quadrants. And we're right here in front of the Aquarian age, at the Aquarian significant quadrant at this time. And so these are ages when our sun in our solar system aligns with the center of the galaxy. They're like windows to perception. And the Hindus and the Maya talk about this, as well do many, many, many other indigenous cultures. There are certain geometrical and mathematical points in time and space and dimension where you can make changes. If we learn to center here and live from here and dream from here and project from here, we can make huge change at this time. There's an energy field about 50 feet in diameter around the human body. The same very complex electromagnetic field that is around the human is identical around the Earth. It's exactly the same thing. There's a cosmic DNA. There is this unfoldment of events that are going to take place no matter what. How we respond to them, the choice is up to us. In the cycles of times, we think we are in the cycles of times. We think in terms of digital time, like looking at a watch. Oh, it's 7:15. But actually, what time is it's a movement of our Earth through space in relationship to our solar system. And there are a lot of cycles in the Earth that are not understood very well. Let's see, I think I already went through this. The tilt of the axis, which is about 23.5 degrees right now, our tilt of the axis of our Earth, is through about 40,000 years. That goes through the actual angle goes from about 21 degrees to 24 degrees. And that angle is really crucial to the weather patterns and to all kinds of ways that we perceive things. So if the tilt of the axis of the Earth goes from about 21 to 24 degrees, we're at a very extreme tilt right now. We have accented weather patterns and seasons. And we also, the Earth orbit around the Sun also moves from an elliptical pattern to a near perfect circle and back to an elliptical pattern over a period of about 100,000 years. Now, 100,000 years is a relatively considered to be the time of a actual world. If we talk in terms of the first and the second and third world, they were each possibly around 100,000 years. And what's really interesting that Dwimvelo taught us is that when they do core samples in dry river beds around in ancient sites around the country, they find that there's about 90,000 years of no vegetation and roughly 10,000 years of vegetation. That means civilization on Earth in between ice ages has roughly 10,000 years to take hold. It's a huge, huge, huge subject. I don't want to go into it too much, but if you look back to our past civilization, one of the oldest that we know of in ancient Mesopotamia, which was the civilization of Sumeria around 4500 BC. Well, that today, if you bring that civilization and do the math up to today, we are about 1100. Let me do the math here. We're about well, if we're in the year 2000 now, then we're about 6,500 years away from that, and that's actually one of the cycles within the 13,000-year cycles where progress tends to ebb and flow and rise and fall. So if we are in about 6,500 years of civilization now, and there are roughly 10,000 years of growth on the planet, habitable growth on the planet, then it makes you wonder how much more time we have before another ice age. I'll leave it at that. But actually, if you look at the last polar shift, which was relatively 13,000 years ago, which would have been about 11,000 BC, and you look at today, you add 2,000 years to that, that's 13,000 years. That's one entire cycle. But how long of that has been a civilization with vegetation that is computed to be about 10,000 years, we don't really know. So there's certainly time for us still before another ice age. And so there are a lot of changes. And also want to point out that because our Earth going around our sun moves from an elliptical pattern to a near perfect circle and back again in these 100,000 years, we are in an extreme elliptical pattern now. And that means that we're really living in a time of extremes, extreme fluctuations with climate, extreme fluctuation with seasons, fluctuation with the ages, and fluctuations with how we are perceiving the very nature and quality of the light from our central sun. So there's a lot going on right now. We're in a time of extremes, and we're being pulled back toward a time of great change when things will hopefully settle down a little bit more. That's the whole idea, is that we go to extremes and then come back to a balanced time, and then go to an extreme and back again. And the whole idea is to just seek conscious balance while we're here, so that we can try to calm down the entire grand cycle, so to speak, and live in peace. So there are a lot of changes, and the ones that's coming up for us right now is that the axis of the Earth has a wobble in it, and that wobble moves around in an elliptical pattern that takes what people say is about 26,000 years. It's been calculated precisely in the year 2000 to be around 25,771.5 years. And that is what that date, December 21st, 2012, on that date, one full cycle is completed on that specific day. If you go back into ancient Tibet or to India, they talk about this cycle in terms of yugas that are around there, and how consciousness changes as we move within this cycle. And on this particular day, December 21st, 2012, the polarity shifts, and it did. They talk about the 13,000 years coming down to where we are now. That was a male cycle, and when we enter into the other side of 2012, it becomes a female cycle. We're seeing that now. And we can see that in the world. We can also see that the north and south poles are about to reverse polarities. We don't know. We probably have several hundred years before they do. And the Russians learned this in their space stations. There's a period of no magnetics when the poles, when there's an electromagnetic pole reversal. That is what the Maya are talking about. This is part of their prophecy. They believe that there is going to be a physical pole shift, which means the axis of the Earth would move to a new location in respect to the equator, as it did 13,000 years ago at the end of the last cycle. So the Maya say that they were there 13,000 years ago. They remember what happened. And they were also there 26,000 years ago, exactly where we... and at the end of the 13,000 year cycle is exactly where we were. We are exactly where we were then, 13,000 years later. And they say, according to them, you don't have to worry, just learn to stay in the heart and connect your heart, your human heart, to the center of the earth. Once we get to the other side of our current planetary transition, we enter into a completely new reality, into the fourth dimension, not in the third, Hopi prophecy. The fourth dimension is hard to explain, but it has to do with time and a new dimension that we can't even conceive of. We can only visit in our dreams right now. It has a lot to do with creation, creative dreaming, meditation, and traveling and leaving our body in a shamanic sense. The Hopi, the Maya, the Kogi, the Arwako, the Miwok, the Tibetans, the Moria, all say that they came from Atlantis. And during Atlantis, we did something which had to do with a specific pyramid. And we misused the energy. Jeffrey said that Atlantis sank because we misused natural law, which caused us to drop in consciousness, and it also caused us to lose our natural Merkaba, electromagnetic field, that when the magnetics went to zero and we lost our memory, then the pole shifted, all our memory was lost. But what happened was there were the ascended masters that were higher than us. They were in the fourth dimension already and above, and they were already on the earth. And the ascended masters were called the Natal in the Aquarian era. And they were the high priests, so to speak, and they were the minority. They started all the way back in Lemuria, which can go back around 250,000 years according to our calculations. And they waited until 13,000 years ago, which would have been about 11,000 BC, after the last pole shift, to come and teach the world again. But what the Maya are teaching, what the Hopi are teaching us, is that there's a quadrant. There's another place, like the four directions or the four ages of the Tarot: Scorpio, Aquarius, Taurus, Leo. These are quadrants. And a little over 6,000 years ago, approximately 6,500 years ago, that's when we had reached this place where we were able to come back. That's when the Ascended Masters had reached a place where they were able to come back and enlighten Earth again. So, if you look at 11,000 AD, I got my calculator here. Look at 11,000 AD. And you look at 6,500 AD, or you subtract from that 6,500, let me do that. You get 4,500, BC. So if you look at 11,000 BC, you subtract 6,500 years, which is a quadrant, you get 4,500 BC. Well, that was about the time of the beginning of the Egyptian civilization, when there were kings that ruled over Egypt. And that was a stair-step society. And that was one of the greatest immediate overnight civilizations, high civilizations that we know of. And it was actually around 3113 or 3114 BC when we had the first pharaoh unite the regions of Egypt and create the first dynasty of Egypt. So it was a really high time. And around that time, around 4,500 BC, at a quadrant in the 13,000 year cycle, is when the Ascended Masters were said to have come back and taught the people to live in civilization again. 4,500 BC is the beginning of the Sumerian civilization. It's as far back as we have recorded history, although we know there are civilizations prior to that one. That's the one that stands out the most. But there are cycles within cycles within cycles, and there's a lot that we don't know. This is just what is evident to us. Civilizations rise and fall. And we're not that advanced right now. We've been much, much, much advanced in the ancient past than we are right now. The Ascended Masters at that time taught the Sumerians and the Egyptians. And if you look at Egyptian history, it's an impossible history. They call it stair-step history because in a single day they will learn everything that took thousands and thousands of years to learn. About a week later, in a single day, they'll learn about thousands and thousands and thousands of more years. That's because the Ascended Masters were giving us our knowledge back again, and the Ascended Masters had retained their memory through all of the Earth changes. They were in the fourth dimension. The Earth has an electromagnetic field. Actually, it goes like this, comes down in the polar region, where the North Pole is, and move my picture. It flows into the North Polar region and down through the Earth and out the South Polar region. It then wraps back around again in the Earth, wraps back around the Earth again, and curves inward again. So let me get my marker here. It goes like this. Right now, and for the last 200 years, and accelerating, the electromagnetic fields are weakening, so much so that they're hundreds of miles away from the North Pole, which is right here. They're even migrating. The North Pole, magnetic north, is migrating into land masses like Siberia. And even there are times in the fluctuation of the Earth's magnetic poles where they go through the Earth and then come back and wrap in again close to the equator. They're weakening. There's holes in the electromagnetic field. Does that mean that our electromagnetic field is weakening? Well, we can practice to keep it alive. Just concentrate on the heart. Concentrate on the heart and concentrate on that geometric pattern going around us. So the magnetosphere is reduced by 15% since 0 AD. Let's see. It is hypothesized by some that approximately every 12,000 years we experience a magnetic pole reversal. That's hypothesis. We don't know when the next one's going to be. I doubt that it will be more than another millennium, however. I think it will be within the next several hundred years, is my guess. But we will hopefully be ready for it and not destroy this world again, live through it, and just get to another level of consciousness, another level of living where we can survive. Everything has electromagnetic field. Our memories are tied to magnetics. The sacred sites are built around the are built to amplify the compass of the heart and keep these electromagnetics flowing. So ancient people, indigenous people, always knew about the electromagnetic field of the earth, and they built their sacred sites in order to stimulate it. Moving right along here, we've come to the completion of a relatively 13,000-year cycle that culminated on December 21st, 2012, and most, I would say, most wisdom teachings and original peoples, a lot of them, original people that carry the wisdom teachings and original teachings will agree with that, or somewhere around there, somewhere very close to there. Okay, you can look at this. Talking about a 13-year cycle and its quadrant of 6,500 years, which pretty much points to the 4 fixed signs in astrology, when there's a window, an opportunity to really open up and open up more to the cosmos, which is what 4-dimensionality, and experience 4-dimensionality, which is what that is really all about, non-locality, to be out of space and time and to wander outside of the body. There exists a supposition that during the last 6,500 years our consciousness has fallen to the point that we have allowed patriarchal thinking to prevail. Remember, we're in a very material age, or we're just leaving a very material age into what's called an energy age of Dwapara by the Hindus. In the past cycle, we're at the end of a cycle where greed, injustice, inequality, hierarchy, elitism, saber rattling, mass consumerism, etc., has been allowed to prevail, and we have also managed to pollute and cause irreverence to the Mother Earth. Every tribe that I've ever, well, the Hopi taught us that the main thing that we can do right now, in spite of any teaching or any knowledge or any projection, is to be in the heart and to have reverence, total reverence, and for the sanctity of Mother Earth. They say that's paramount. Jeffrey Green said the patriarchal will be undetermined between 6500 BC and 5500 BC. And we're at the end of that cycle now, so we're turning back toward the matriarchal cycle. The crux is that we're approximately at the same point in the grand cycle of our solar system to where we were at the end of the Atlantean civilization, or actually that would be the conception of the Atlantean civilization 26,000 years ago, and then the demise of the Atlantean civilization was 13,000 years ago. So we've come full circle, however way you look at it, whether you think that we're a full cycle away from the inception of the Atlantean era or a half a cycle away from the demise of the Atlantean era, we've come full circle. And it looks like we more parallel the demise of the Atlantean era, where they misused natural law and they had high technology and they were very much materialistic. And it looks like we're about at that point now, where we're very much to the point of extreme materialism, and the patriarchy is about to take a different turn. Let me put it that way. We're in a turn. We're at a fork in the road. So I want to talk real quickly about the divine child. Neptune represents greater love, and a greater love is the love that we have when we start to feel love for the stranger or the other, as a part for ourselves, our family, or our close friends. The Hopi people have or the Maya have a native greeting that is called In Lakesh, Alaki'in, and what that means is hello, you are me and I am another you. And they've done this for centuries. So they've been in unity consciousness for a long time, and this is something that little kids know. We are slowly turning the corner, remembering how good it feels to help others simply because we can. We are headed toward a high time of consciousness upon the earth, and I believe the Pluto and Leo generation are leading the way right now, and many of us are leaving the earth and going to spirit, of course. We're a waning generation, but we're trying to say a lot before we go. Okay. The nodal axis of the planet Neptune is the same for all people upon the earth. We already talked about that, and that is Leo. And the nodal axis, they are Aquarius, South Node, and Aquarius, South Node, and Leo, North Node. Aquarius in its highest form, the South Node of Neptune, our higher consciousness, is the miracle of curiosity, invention, innovation, the higher mind, the higher perspective, experimentation, and novelty. Because everyone on the planet today has Aquarian South Node, means we all contain cellular memory of the civilization or era that we call Atlantis, or what we would refer to as the last Aquarian age, which was a matriarchal civilization that existed in the mid-Atlantic. Leo, in its highest form, is the miracle of creation that is the alchemy that takes place between our human consciousness when we choose to be entered in our hearts. So there's a pulse or a spark or electricity, a circuit that happens when we center in the heart to meditate, where our center of consciousness comes from the brain to the heart, and it forms an electric field around us, and that is balancing the head and the heart. Leo represents the purest, most subjective and passionate form of creativity. Just think of all the possibilities you imagined as a kid. This is cellular memory of how we used to know to create. So this is all very simple. It's second nature. Just be like a child, be in your heart, and you're going to learn everything you need to know. And that's what the Hopi teach us. Don't overthink things. You need to balance the head with the heart. Now is the time of the evolution of our planetary consciousness, when every soul has the ability to remember this simple natural law. Dream big. Don't limit yourself. Wonder, imagine, and dream a new reality. And remember, please, that Jupiter is the ancestral co-ruler of Neptune. We need to learn to dream big. This is huge. This is what the dolphins know. This is what the indigenous people know. This is the natural order of things, this dreaming, creation into reality. And, okay, there's lots of stories about that. And the Aboriginal in Australia say that we are not in reality, we are in a dream in our waking life, and the real reality is our dream time. It's when we create. So before you go to bed, hold a good thought. What we may not realize is that in the greater cycle of things, every dream or prayer we've ever imagined has come full circle back to us. It's just the way things are. We may not be alive to see it. It may be another lifetime, but everything's a circle. Everything comes back and orbits and returns to the center, the star at the center of who we really are. And our heart represents the star of the center of who we are. Okay, let's see. We need to connect our heart to the heart of the earth. We have to love her. And at the same time, we have to connect to the heart of the Son, our Father. And when we do, it is the energy of the Holy Trinity, and we become the divine child. It's so simple. If you go out in a nice place or even on your lawn and lay on the earth, you'll feel the Mother below you and the Father is on top of you. And the more you do this, it becomes incredibly profound, and you start to feel a circuit moving through you, because you're becoming the median point between both of them. It's pretty deep. The easiest thing to do in all of this is to just relax, be like a child, and enjoy it. And we will discover that the reality that we live in is not what we think it is. Everything is consciousness. We have a sphere of energy around us that is right at the end of our fingertips. There will come a day when we begin to remember our relationship to the rest of life and begin to remember how we create things. As Dreamvelo said that. In conclusion, the stuff of stars, we are carbon-based like the stars. We have a center in our heart like the stars. In the midst of the death that is all around us right now, some of us know that those souls have moved to a place of rest and unlimited love. Some people call it the stars. We may have been given a gift, a time out to stop and think for a moment that perhaps our lives are not our own, and there's something that we can do to serve the greater good. And let's see, the same light that orients us and protects us also brings great earthly change. So it depends on how you look at things. There's great balance in all things, and perception and reasoning and how our view of things is what's tantamount. I'll try to go into that in another lecture. Do something every day to nudge yourself more toward the light. Truth is there. The truth is there is no separation between us or anyone or anything. There's only one spirit that runs through all things, and one heart at the center. We're about to wake up to a new dimension that we have only dreamt about. Please join me in a grand experiment in greeting the day or taking a moment to place your hand on your heart and dream a healed earth and all life. If you do that, even for a moment, it helps to change the world. We can do that now. We're at a crossroads. We can help turn the tide and revert back to a heart-balanced life if we concentrate on our heart and dream from our heart. And that's when stuff enters and becomes us and becomes reality. This is a petroglyph in Zion National Park of Wolf Rock, where people meditated and did prayers to the wolf spirit because they regarded them so much, so highly. This is the great mystery, or the center of all things. These are birds, but this is a very sacred place, and I'll hope to talk about more of it in the next lecture. One of the things that I learned in Zion from the people that studied the petroglyphs was the petroglyphs are not necessarily what you think they are. This is not just about someone who loves wolves. This is someone who is learning to embrace all of the qualities of the wolf spirit and balance those qualities within the human being, the human consciousness. So the stuff of stars, Jeffrey said that, let me go back here a moment. He said that there is absolutely nothing to transcend on earth, and there's only all of creation to unite with. So I'd just like to leave you with this saying from a unknown book, Urania's Mirror, that he told us about, unknown author, little known book, written in 1825. And he said that this phrase confounds the male way of thinking, but the female-centered consciousness fully understands it. How wonderful the power, wisdom, goodness, and magnificence displayed in the formation and government of so vast a scale of creation, which is extended throughout the boundless regions of universal space, an extent incomprehensible to all but the infinite mind, and of which it has been aptly said, Its entirety is everywhere. Oh, I'm sorry, I left out a word. Its entire center is everywhere, but its circumference is nowhere. In Lakesh ala Ki'in. Thank you for joining us today. And Goddess bless, and peace to you, and balance, and learning and healing. Thank you for joining us.